The unexpected encounter, the snow fell gently against the cafe windows as Emma Rodriguez pulled her worn coat tighter around her shoulders. Her heart hammered against her ribs as she stared through the glass at the man waiting inside. Supposed to be her sister's date, not hers. But Victoria had taken one look at the setup and declared it beneath her standards. "He's probably some desperate nobody," Victoria had said, examining her perfectly manicured nails. "You go instead. Emma, just sit there for an hour and leave. Don't embarrass the family name." Now Emma stood frozen on the sidewalk, watching James Morrison check his watch. He didn't look like a nobody. Even from outside, she could see the quality of his charcoal gray suit, the way he carried himself with quiet confidence. His dark hair was slightly tousled, and when he smiled at the little girl beside him, something warm flickered in Emma's chest. The child couldn't be more than 6 years old. She had her father's dark hair, but it curled wildly around her face as she colored, intently in a book. Her small legs swung back and forth under the table, and every few minutes she would show her father her work with obvious pride. Emma's stepmother had been clear about the arrangement. The family's reputation depended on someone showing up to this blind date. Emma was expendable, forgettable. If things went wrong, no one would connect her to the prestigious Rodriguez name that Victoria had worked so hard to build in their social circles. Taking a deep breath, Emma pushed through the cafe door. The warmth hit her immediately, along with the rich scent of coffee and fresh pastries. A few customers looked up from their newspapers and laptops, but most remained absorbed in their own worlds. James looked up as she approached, and Emma felt her breath catch. His eyes were the deepest brown she'd ever seen, kind but searching. There was something magnetic about his presence that made her understand why Victoria might have been interested. If only she'd bothered to learn more about him. "You must be... ... James began, standing politely. "Emma," she said quickly, before he could say her sister's name. Emma." He extended his hand, and when she took it, she felt a small jolt of electricity. His grip was firm but gentle, and he held her gaze for just a moment longer than necessary. "James Morrison," he said, "and this is my daughter, Sophie." Sophie looked up from her coloring book, her dark eyes bright with curiosity. "Hi, Emma. Do you like butterflies?" "I'm drawing one for my daddy." Emma knelt down to Sophie's level, genuinely interested. "It's beautiful, Sophie. I love the purple wings you chose." The little girl beamed, and Emma felt something loosen in her. Children had always been easy for her to connect with. They didn't judge based on the quality of your clothes or the size of your bank account. "Would you like to sit down?" James asked, pulling out a chair for her. The gesture was so naturally courteous that Emma found herself relaxing slightly as she settled into the seat. "I have to be honest," Emma began, fidgeting with her napkin. "Not usually the type of person who goes on blind dates." James smiled, and fine lines crinkled at the corners of his eyes. "Neither am I, actually. This was set up by a business associate who thought we might ... connect." Sophie had returned to her coloring, but Emma noticed she kept glancing up at them with interest. "How old are you, Sophie?" Emma asked. 6 3/4. Sophie replied seriously. "Daddy says I'm very mature for my age. I can tell," Emma said warmly. "That's a very sophisticated butterfly you're drawing." As they talked, Emma found herself genuinely enjoying the conversation. James was nothing like what she'd expected from her stepmother's dismissive description. He was articulate and thoughtful, asking about her interests and actually listening to her answers. When she mentioned working at the local library, his face lit up with genuine enthusiasm. "Sophie loves books," he said, glancing fondly at his daughter. "We go to the library every Saturday morning. Maybe you've helped us before without realizing it." "I work mostly in the children's section," Emma admitted. "I love helping kids find their next favorite book." Sophie's head popped up immediately. "Do you know any stories about princesses who save themselves?" Emma's heart melted a little more. "Oh, I know lots of those stories. Would you like me to recommend some next time you visit?" "Yes, please." Sophie clapped her hands together then, looked at her father. "Daddy, I like Emma. She's nice." James's expression softened as he watched the interaction between Emma and his daughter. Emma could see something shift in his eyes, a warmth that hadn't been there before. It made her stomach flutter in a way that was both thrilling and terrifying. They ordered coffee and hot chocolate for Sophie, along with a plate of cookies that the little girl insisted on sharing. As they talked, Emma learned that James had been raising Sophie alone since she was 2 years old. He didn't elaborate on what had happened to Sophie's mother, but Emma could see the protective love in his eyes whenever he looked at his daughter. "What about you?" James asked. "Do you have family in the city?" Emma's smile faltered slightly. "Yes, my stepmother and sister. We live together in the house my father left us." She didn't mention how that arrangement worked in practice. How? She was more like live-in help than family. Sophie had finished her hot chocolate and was starting to get sleepy. Leaning against Emma's arm, without thinking, Emma began to gently stroke the child's hair, humming softly. Sophie's eyes fluttered closed, and within minutes, she was sleeping peacefully against Emma's shoulder. James watched. This tender scene was something that looked like amazement. "She doesn't usually warm up to people so quickly," he said quietly. Emma looked down at the sleeping child and felt her heart swell with protective tenderness. "She's wonderful, James. You're doing an amazing job with her. Some days I wonder," he admitted, his voice soft with vulnerability. "It's not easy being a single parent, especially when you're trying to build a business at the same time." "What kind of business?" Emma asked, genuinely curious. James hesitated for a moment. "Technology investments, mostly. I help fund startups that are developing innovative solutions." He seemed to be watching for her reaction carefully. Emma nodded with interest. "That sounds fascinating. It must be exciting to be part of creating something new." Duh! The relief on James's face was subtle, but unmistakable. Emma got the impression that people often had strong reactions to learning about his work, though she couldn't understand why. As the evening wound down, James gently woke Sophie and helped her into her coat. Emma felt a pang of disappointment that their time together was ending. She'd expected this to be an ordeal to endure, but instead, she'd found herself not wanting it to end. "Could I see you again?" James asked as they prepared to leave. "Maybe somewhere Sophie can play? There's a great park downtown that she loves." Emma's heart raced. "I'd like that very much." They exchanged phone numbers, and James helped Sophie wave goodbye as they headed to their car. Emma watched through the window as James carefully buckled Sophie into her car seat, the gentle patience in his movements making her chest ache with longing as she walked to the bus stop. Emma's phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "Thank you for a wonderful evening. Sophie hasn't stopped talking about you." James. Emma smiled and typed back, "Thank you for including me. Sophie is lucky to have such a devoted father." His response came quickly. "We both hope to see you soon." Emma clutched her phone to her chest as the bus arrived. For the first time in years, she felt like she might actually deserve something good in her life. But as the city lights blurred past the bus window, reality began to creep back in. What would her stepmother say when she found out Emma had actually enjoyed the date? What would happen when James learned the truth about why she'd been there in the first place? Love against all odds, 3 days had passed since the cafe, and Emma found herself checking her phone constantly for messages from James. They'd texted back and forth several times, sharing small details about their days. James sent her a photo of Sophie at the library, proudly holding a stack of books about brave princesses. Emma had responded with a picture of the children's section display she'd created featuring strong female characters in literature. The easy communication between them felt natural and genuine, so different from the awkward small talk she was used to with the few men Victoria had deemed acceptable for her to speak with at social functions. Emma was reorganizing the picture book section when her phone buzzed again. This time it was a call, not a text. "Emma." James's voice was warm even through the phone. "Hope I'm not interrupting your work." "Not at all," she said, stepping into a quiet corner. "Is everything okay?" "More than okay. Sophie has been asking about you nonstop, and I was wondering, would you like to join us for lunch this Saturday? There's this little place near the park," she mentioned. "Nothing fancy." Emma's heart soared. "I'd love to. Perfect. I should probably warn you, Sophie has been planning activities for you all week. I hope you're prepared for an interrogation about your favorite colors, foods, and whether you believe unicorns are real." Emma laughed. "I think I can handle that. And for the record, unicorns are absolutely real." Good answer, James said, and she could hear the smile in his voice. I'll see you Saturday at noon. After they hung up, Emma practically floated through. The rest of her shift, she was so absorbed in her happy thoughts that she didn't notice Victoria waiting by the library entrance until she was almost at the door. There you are, Victoria said, her perfectly glossed lips curved in a cold smile. Mother and I have been wondering how your little charade went the other night. Emma's stomach dropped. It wasn't a charade. It was just dinner. With a man who was supposed to be meeting me, Victoria's voice sharpened. Do you have any idea what you may have cost me, Victoria? I did exactly what you asked. I went in. Your place and apparently made quite an impression. Victoria's eyes glittered dangerously. Imagine my surprise when Beatrice Whitmore mentioned seeing you at Antonio's cafe with James Morrison. Do you know who James Morrison is, Emma? Emma's mouth went dry. Something in Victoria's tone suggested she was about to learn something. That would change everything. He's the Morrison of Morrison Tech Ventures. His company has invested in half the major tech innovations of the past decade, worth more money than you could count in a lifetime. Victoria stepped closer, her voice dropping to a vicious whisper. And you, in your little thrift store dress, convinced him you were good enough for his time. The blood drained from Emma's face. She thought about James's careful way of describing his business, how he'd seemed to be watching for her reaction. He hadn't been modest about his work. He'd been testing her. I didn't know, Emma whispered. Of course you didn't. But now that you do, you're going to fix this. Victoria grabbed Emma's arm, her manicured nails digging in painfully. You're going to call him and explain that there was a mistake. That you're not the Rodriguez he was supposed to meet. You're going to graciously step aside so I can pursue what should have been mine from the beginning. Emma pulled her arm free, anger flaring in her chest. No. Victoria's eyebrows shot up. Excuse me. I said no. I'm not going to lie to James. And I'm not going to hand him over to you like he's some kind of prize to be won. You ungrateful little Victoria caught herself, glancing around at the other people leaving the library. Let me remind you of your position in our family, Emma. You live in our house, eat our food, exist on our charity. If you think you can cross me over some man, he's not just some man, Emma interrupted, surprising herself with her own boldness. He's kind and thoughtful, and he's raising his daughter alone. He doesn't deserve to be manipulated by someone who only cares about his bank account. Victoria's face went pale with rage. You have until Monday to call him and end whatever this is, or you'll find yourself looking for somewhere else to live. As Victoria stalked away, Emma sank onto a nearby bench, her hands shaking. She thought about Sophie's bright smile, about James's gentle eyes, about the way she'd felt when she was with them, like she mattered, like she belonged somewhere. Saturday arrived gray and drizzly. But Emma's spirits lifted the moment she saw James and Sophie waiting for her outside the small bistro. Sophie broke away from her father and ran to hug Emma's legs, chattering excitedly about everything she'd planned for their day. Over lunch, Emma found herself studying James more carefully. Now that she knew about his wealth, she could see subtle signs she'd missed before. The quality of his watch, the way the restaurant staff treated him with particular respect, the fact that he seemed completely unconcerned about the cost of anything they ordered. But what struck her most was how none of that seemed to matter to him. He was entirely focused on Sophie's animated stories and Emma's responses to them. When Sophie spilled juice on her dress, he handled it with patient good humor. When she got cranky because she was tired, he distracted her with a silly song that made Emma laugh despite her worries. After lunch, they walked to the nearby park. Sophie immediately claimed the swings, demanding that both adults take turns pushing her higher. Emma found herself relaxing as she watched James's easy interaction with his daughter.
Whatever.
His bank account looked like he was simply a devoted father who wanted his child to be happy. You're quiet today, James observed as they sat on a bench watching Sophie climb the jungle gym. Is everything all right? Emma turned to look at him, this man who had somehow become so important to her in such a short time. She thought about Victoria's ultimatum, about the truth she'd been hiding, about how impossible this whole situation had become. James, she began carefully, why didn't you tell me who you really are? He was quiet for a long moment, his eyes fixed on Sophie. How much do you know? Enough to understand that you could have any woman you wanted. Enough to wonder why you're sitting here with me. James turned to face her fully, his expression serious. Do you really not see it, Emma? From the moment you knelt down to talk? To Sophie about her drawing, from the way you listened when I talked about the challenges of single parenthood, from how you hummed her to sleep against your shoulder. You're the first person I've met in years who saw us as people, not as opportunities. Emma's throat tightened with emotion. But I'm nobody, James. I work at a library. I live with my stepfamily because I can't afford my own place. I don't fit. In your world, my world, James said firmly, is right there on those monkey bars. It's bedtime stories and scraped knees and wondering if I'm making the right choices for my daughter. Everything else is just noise. Before Emma could respond, Sophie came running over, grass stains on her knees and joy written all over her face. Emma, Daddy, did you see me go across all the bars? I didn't fall once. We saw, Emma said, opening her arms for a hug. You're getting so strong. As Sophie snuggled against her, Emma felt James's hand cover hers on the bench. His touch was warm and reassuring. But she couldn't shake the weight of Victoria's ultimatum, or the growing certainty that this beautiful, impossible thing between them was doomed from the start. That evening, as James walked her to the bus stop with a sleepy Sophie in his arms, he paused. I know there are things about my life that make dating difficult, but I want you to know that what I feel for you, what Sophie feels for you, it's real. Don't let anyone convince you otherwise. Emma looked up at him, memorizing the gentle strength in his face, the way Sophie curled trustingly against his shoulder. James, think about it, he said softly. That's all I ask. As the bus pulled away from the curb, Emma watched James, and Sophie grow smaller in the distance. Her phone buzzed with a text from Victoria. Remember, Emma? Monday. But as Emma stared out at the city lights blurring past, she realized that for the first time in her life, she was going to fight for something she wanted. James Morrison might be wealthy beyond her imagination. The man who sang silly songs to his daughter and held doors for librarians was worth fighting for. Monday morning would come, but Emma Rodriguez was done being invisible. She was going to choose love.